Last year, my wife and I lost our 5-year-old son very suddenly. We didn't know how to handle it. I buried myself at work, staying out of the house for as long as possible, not even having the strength to talk to my wife. Everything reminds me that he's gone. A few months ago, my wife left to stay with her mother for a while, maybe forever. I can't blame her, but now it's just me in the house, completely alone. Most nights, I stay at work until my boss literally orders me to go home. I always dread walking through the door, where there used to be the sounds of my wife coaxing her son to bed. There's only dust. That was until a few weeks ago, when I got home close to midnight. I heard it before I even stepped inside. The home security system was blaring. The alarm had been tripped, as if someone had broken in. Carefully, I made my way to the door, but it was still locked. I used my key to get inside, still not seeing signs of anyone, then punched in the code to turn off the wailing siren. Silence fell immediately. I listened out for sounds of anyone, anything, yet there was nothing. The house was completely still. Suddenly, my phone rang. My heart jumped, but I soon realized it was just the security company calling to see if they should send the police. I told them I'd handle it myself. Hanging up, I combed through the house, checking every corner, behind every door, and even the attic. I made sure there was no one home but me. That night, I was exhausted enough to shrug it off as a false alarm. Then I fell asleep. I didn't forget about it though. It stayed at the back of my mind. And then, a few nights later, something else happened in the middle of the night. This time, I was awoken by a familiar sound, the thumping against the wall. On the other side of the wall was my son's old playroom. The sound was just like when he would throw his toys at the wall during playtime. My blood ran cold, but no, it couldn't be that. Instead, my mind raced to the next conclusion. Someone was in there, messing with his stuff. I shot out of bed in a fit of rage. Nobody had been in the room in months. It was supposed to be left untouched, not ransacked by thieves. I stormed down the hall and threw the door open. I stood there confused. Nobody was in the room, but all his things had been thrown across the floor. His dresser empty, his toys broken, even his pictures torn. At this point, I was useless. With the thought of some burglar breaking into the house just to destroy the memory of my son, I could do nothing but call the police. The findings of their investigation that night were strange, to say the least. The bedroom window was still intact and locked. The alarm was never tripped, and there seemed to be no sign of theft or forced entry. However, they promised to keep a lookout for any suspicious persons in the area. I thanked them and they went on their way, leaving me alone to pick up the pieces of my son's room. All I could wish was for that to be the last of it, but the ordeal was not over. A few nights later, that same week, I was in bed, struggling to sleep. The minutes dragged on and on, until it was past 4 in the morning, and I still couldn't keep my eyes shut. Something was wrong, and I was going to get to the bottom of it. Then, in the dead of night, I heard a sound, clinking in the kitchen. For just a second, a pile of dishes got moved and resettled. I quietly got out of bed, then made my way to the kitchen. I stood in the center, scanning the countertop, until I looked at the strainer in the sink. The knife I had washed and left there to dry earlier in the evening was gone. Feeling naked and vulnerable, I began to panic. I looked around for whoever could have taken it. Then I saw someone standing in the dining room. They were just a kid, a boy, far too grown to be my son. But other than that, they could have been anyone. And they were standing in my house with a knife. In a split second, I decided to fight. I screamed and charged the kid. They immediately turned tail and ran for the back door. As they fumbled to get it open, they dropped the knife to the floor. They got 1 foot outside, but I was just about to grab them, only for the door to slam shut right as I got there. I smashed into it face first, sending blood gushing out of my nose. It took a moment to collect myself. Then I picked up the knife off the ground and ripped the door open. I ran through the yard, chasing after the intruder. But then I found myself in the middle of the street, and they were nowhere in sight. They had disappeared, and in their place was a pair of blinding headlights that began flashing red and blue as they came to a stop in front of me. It was a cop, on the same patrol through the neighborhood I had made them start doing in the first place. There I was, almost naked in the middle of the street, at an ungodly hour, a knife in my hand and blood running down my face and neck. I must have looked insane. I'm sure the only reason I didn't get arrested was because the cop recognized me. He ushered me inside and took my statement, but instead of promising to go after the little bastard who broke into my house and busted my nose, he told me to get some rest and book an appointment with a therapist. In other words, he thinks I'm crazy, and now the whole neighborhood thinks so too. I'm no freak though. Someone is terrorizing me, tormenting me with the loss of my son. Maybe they even had something to do with his death. When I find out the truth, I'll leave an update.